Today I'm so excited to take you to a secondhand bookstore that is very special to me. This bookstore was a regular haunt of mine when I was much younger, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that it's still around. I can't believe it. So I'm super excited. I'm going to take you there. We're going to walk through and we're going to pick up some treasures, and then after the walkthrough I'm going to show them off to you. So let's go. Today's trip to the bookstore takes us to Leigh-on-Sea, and this is Gallery Books, and this window display is tremendous. The Sylvia Plaths are wonderfully enticing. We have Susan Sontag, and we have some very pulp-esque covers for Jack Kerouac and H.G. Wells. I was so excited to go inside and see if they were as beautiful up close. Ariel, wonderful collection of poetry. Tristessa, very poetic novella. And H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man. I just love those covers. And if you turn right upon your entry to Gallery Books, you'll find this lovely little nook. And this enclosure most certainly was quite nostalgic for me. This is where I spent all of my time as an adolescent. This was one of my regular haunts. And the display case has some wonderful signed editions. I didn't want to handle them, but there was some lovely literary gems there. That's a collection of Hardy, and that's Kazuo Ishiguro, Blue Edition. We have some Dickens here and some Don Quixote. I love Don Quixote. And this illustrated edition of Shakespeare in 3 volumes was tempting, as was this collection of Jane Austen. I adore Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion. Clarissa, now this did tempt me, this massive 2-volume set of Richardson's masterpiece. And I was also quite tempted by some of the offerings of children's literature. The illustrated Beatrix Potters near the door were very tempting, and I'm most certainly looking forward to having children of my own, just so that I can read a lot of the stories that actually I didn't benefit from when I was younger. There are many great classics that I simply didn't read as a child, so I'm most certainly looking forward to story time. I'm looking forward to teaching them about literature. I think that will be a lot of fun. And these Folio Society books were £3 per volume, which I think is a wonderful bargain because they're usually very expensive. There were plenty of Anthony Trollops, and there was plenty of Shakespeare. The illustration on this hardback of Shakespeare's histories is lush. They had quite a few beautiful hardback offerings. This edition of Coleridge, Among the Lakes and Mountains, with the beautiful illustration on the front, really did call out to me, as did this volume of Siegfried Sassoon, one of the First World War poets. His poetry, along with Wilfred Owen's, never fails to pierce me. They had a history section too, which I thought was wonderful, and I was definitely tempted by this 5-volume set of the Second World War by Winston Churchill. As you may know, Churchill won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and I think that's pretty interesting, so I wanted to dip into it, and I've earmarked this one for the future. I recently rewatched The World at War, narrated by Laurence Olivier, and I found it really tremendous. This seems to be an artifact, a little historical artifact. The rise and fall of the Third Reich looked interesting. If you go a little further into the bookstore, you've got all these paperbacks, and I was intrigued by all of the John Creaseys, the creased Creaseys. John Creasey, one of the most prolific novelists of all time. I haven't really read anything by him, though. I wonder if he's worth picking up. I have a lot of respect for any writer who is able to be as prolific as Creasey clearly was. We've got some Dante there. There's a resurgence in Dante appreciation. The Charles Dickens Encyclopedia caught my eye. I'm rereading Dickens a lot recently. He gives me a lot of comfort. So F.R. Leavis's Dickens, the novelist, stood out to me, particularly a chapter on how to read Great Expectations, which is my personal all-time favourite Dickens Now, talk about polar opposites. Dostoevsky and Dickens couldn't really be further away from each other in sentiment. I suppose there's some parallels and overlap, but not really. Goethe is an author of titanic status, whose deep dives I'm earmarking for the future. I'm looking forward to it. William Golding, I went through a bit of a Golding phase. I used to binge a lot of his works. I was intrigued by Maxim Gorky. I know he's written a few things about Tolstoy, but I couldn't seem to find any of his writings on Tolstoy here. E.M. Forster, there was plenty of Forster on offer. Passage to India, and I quite like The Dust Jacket. It was a bit dirty, but I quite like it. We have some Fielding, Joseph Andrews and Tom Jones. Henry Fielding, who inspired Jane Austen. Jane Austen is essentially a merging of Samuel Richardson and Henry Fielding. Henry Fielding, who could really churn out a plot. Richardson, who could do character really well. And we have Thomas Hardy here. The Woodlanders is definitely not one of his masterpieces, but it is a novel of his that I have great affection for, and I was tempted, even though I already have it in several volumes, just to pick it up again. Perhaps what I really want to do is reread it, and as we slide into autumn, perhaps I will do that. We've got Heinrich Heine, who said, "Where they burn books, they will eventually burn people." How true was that? We have some Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan, and Homer's Iliad. My favourite translation of the Iliad is by Robert Fagles, but the Fitzgerald is good as well. Joyce's Ulysses, and plenty of D.H. Lawrence. D.H. Lawrence is another one that I'm kind of earmarking to read in the future in a big way because I know I'll enjoy him. And we have Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe, a gothic tale that I've been hungering to reread, but I didn't like that cover. We've got Solzhenitsyn's Cancer Ward. If you haven't already listened to the Gulag Archipelago podcast, then do check it out. We've got some stuff on the Gothic here, and look how old these books are. These are extraordinary. I was so tempted to pick up basically all of these, particularly Byron's works, and there was a novel by George Eliot. I didn't really want to handle them one-handed. Oh, you can see Chaucer there, wonderful stuff. This is Plutarch, and feeling as though I was in danger of breaking the bank, I decided to leave with some wares. Now let's show you what I got. Okay, so I have two paper bags delightfully bulging with bookish goods that I cannot wait to reveal to you. And just a quick note, I could have easily got so many more books than I did. I had to exercise a lot of restraint. I normally don't in bookstores, and I have a little bit of regret. Particularly for the 3-volume set, the leather-bound, heavy set of Shakespeare, replete with beautiful illustrations every other page. I think I may go back for that. I was very, very tempted to pick up the 2-volume big hardback set of Clarissa, but I was telling myself, hey, you've got lots of Clarissa, you've got lots of lovely Clarissa, don't buy Clarissa again. The Shakespeare collection was gorgeous, and I was really tempted by some of the ancient-looking classics, particularly the gilt-edged golden Byron collection that had beautiful illustrations inside. The paper quality was gorgeous. It was a bit dirty, which is understandable because it's quite old. There was a gorgeous hardback of George Eliot, but it wasn't Middlemarch. We're reading Middlemarch in the book club very soon. If it had been Middlemarch, I would have grabbed it. But I'll show you what I did grab instead. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is the books that I took from the window display. I saw them when I rocked up and I immediately knew I had to have them. I grabbed them straight away, worried that somebody else might take them before me, so I grabbed them. But I do have a little regret here because I should have grabbed a few more from the window display, but I felt a bit bad because they looked so good in the display and I thought somebody else might like them. I didn't want to take everything in the display, but when I rocked up to the counter, the two owners, who are lovely, seemed really happy that I picked them up. They had just put them in the display half an hour before I turned up. They said I had good taste. They loved the covers. They particularly liked one of the covers, and I mean the reason I picked it up was mainly for the cover. Let me show you what I picked up. Now, first things first, we have Ariel by Sylvia Plath. A wonderful volume, a volume of poetry that many viewers of this channel have spoken about and shared their love for. I can see why this is a popular one. If you turn to the copyright information, you can see copyright 1965, Ted Hughes. This is not a first edition. This edition was published and reprinted by Faber in 1976. It was originally published in 1965. I love how plain it is. I love the two bold colours, and I love the sort of out of sync lettering of the title. It's just wonderful, and it's been kept in marvellous condition. I got this for about £12. Yes, it was £12. This is the collection that begins with Morning Song. Love set you going like a fat gold watch. The midwife slapped your foot soles, and your bald cry took its place among the elements. Let me show you what else I picked up. This was the second book that I picked up from the window display. I think this was about £15. Yeah, £15. Tristessa by Jack Kerouac. It was the cover. Now, I've read Tristessa before. I liked it. It was one of my favourite works, though a lesser known work of Kerouac. It's very poetic. I read everything that Jack Kerouac put out when I was researching for my final dissertation at university. I was studying the Beat Generation, so I read everything by Kerouac, Ginsberg, Corso, Burroughs. Look at the cover, it's very pulpy. So the guy who worked there, he pointed out that the cover was just tremendous. And the cover is tremendous because it has that sort of aura of the Pulp Fiction era. Or perhaps not an aura, perhaps it was actually part of that era. Let's check out when this one was published. Published in England, this one, in 1963. Okay, look at what it says on the cover. Kerouac's wildest tale of love. He says completely new and important things about the real tragedy of narcotics and prostitution. Just appreciate that beautiful pulpy cover for a moment. The back is a little bit plain, but that's okay. Here is a new novel, the back tells us. Unlike anything you have ever read before, he tells the heartbreaking story of Tristessa, a girl of throat-stopping Aztec loveliness, eternally hooked on morphine, and a young American writer, staggering between the forces of desire for her and horror for what she has become. Before I show you the next little gem that I picked up in this bookstore, let me read you the opening, see what you think of it. I'm riding along with Tristessa in the cab, drunk, with a big bottle of Juarez bourbon whiskey. In the till bag, railroad, loot bag they'd accused me of holding in Railroad 1952. Here I am in Mexico City, rainy Saturday night. Mysteries, old dreams, side streets with no names reeling in. The little street where I'd walked through crowds of gloomy hobo Indians, wrapped in tragic shawls enough to make you cry. And you thought you saw knives flashing beneath the folds. Lugubrious dreams as tragic as the one of old railroad night, where my father sits, big of thighs, in smoking car of night. Outside's a brakeman with the red light and white light, lumbering in the sad, vast mist tracks of life. But now I'm up on that vegetable plateau, Mexico, the moon of Sitlapole. A few nights earlier I'd stumbled to, on the sleepy roof, on the way to the ancient dripping stone toilet. Tristessa is high, beautiful as ever, going home gaily to go to bed and enjoy her morphine. That's Tristessa by Jack Kerouac. Let me show you the next goodie. Okay, this one was just £1.50, which isn't a lot of money. I mean, it could have been cheaper, that's fine, but £1.50 is an absolute steal for books like this, especially because it's not in bad condition. I bought this purely because of the contents, not because of the cover or anything like that. This is Dickens the Novelist by F.R. Leavis. Now, I'm not a huge fan of F.R. Leavis. I'm not, unfortunately, but I couldn't pass it up when I flicked through it and I saw him writing about Great Expectations and how to read Great Expectations. And when I saw him railing against the ideologues that have now completely taken hold of our universities, I thought, okay, £1.50 is fair enough. The thing about these independent second-hand bookstores is you have to support them. They are doing such good work. So many of them are going out of business, especially post-pandemic. Many of them completely went bust, completely went bankrupt. There's not many of them around anymore, so if you find one, patronise it and support them. And the best way to support them is to buy their wares. So I wouldn't haggle if it was me. I wouldn't personally haggle. We all like getting a bargain from time to time. Me, I like to patronise and support those who are spearheading or keeping the arts alive. And second-hand bookstores are a bastion of literature. They're a bastion of free speech and art. So we must help keep them alive, and I did so in a very small way by picking up this little volume about Dickens, the novelist. Now let me show you my next little goodie. My next goodie is a 2-volume set in the old Everyman library edition of Don Quixote de la Mancha by Cervantes. Now I have always wanted this, but I've put it off because I have tons of different editions and translations of Don Quixote. Paperbacks, hardbacks, special editions, old and new. I have tons of them. I didn't need any more, but I've always wanted this, even though it's not in my favourite translation. It's the Motto translation. But having rifled through this a little bit, I'm changing my mind. I kind of like it. I wanted this purely because of the cover and to add it to my collection, because I collect Everyman's from this era. And if you look at the cover, Volume 1 has our knight errant and a windmill, of course. And Volume 2, I love this, has the knight errant taking Sancho, the lovable squire, to task. He's chastising Sancho Panza on the cover. I just love that. I think these are lovely little additions, and I'm really happy to have picked them up because I tried to search for them online and I couldn't really find them, and the ones that I could find were a bit too pricey. These were pretty cheap as far as secondhand books can go. I think maybe £6 or £8, I can't remember. But I am very happy to have these as part of my collection, and I'll do a little reading of these over at the book club in the Motto translation if you fancy checking that out. So there we go, those are the books I picked up. I really wanted to pick up some more. Maybe I'll go back. This very well could be my favourite bookstore, at least my favourite secondhand bookstore anywhere. I've been all over the world. I've travelled to the most famous bookstores. I've found little hidden literary gems, bookstore gems here and there, everywhere, and I think I love this one the most. It has a very special place in my heart. It reminds me of my childhood or young adulthood and adolescence a little bit, and it was just great to see it was still going. It was great to see the great books that they have inside, and it was wonderful to talk to the men running the bookstore. They do a great job. So if you do want to check it out, I would highly recommend it. It's called Gallery Books in Leigh-on-Sea. It's a great little bookstore. Really check it out if you're in the area. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe, because that tells me to keep making more. And do let me know in the comments below, when was the last time you visited a second-hand bookstore and what did you pick up? Thanks for watching. Happy reading.